Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and as you can tell, we're still in our home construction around here, so I'm going to be shooting in this awkward space between boxes and furniture, and hopefully it won't be much longer before that's done, or at least the game room portion is done where I normally record and things can return to normal there. But for now, we're going to be taking a look at the Cyberpunk adventure, A Night at the Opera. Written by Jay Parker and James Hutt, the scenario appears in 2022's Tales of the Red, published by Talsorian Games. Coming in at 13 pages, the scenario was pretty short. It took us 7 or 8 hours to complete it. The Edgerunners are hired to help find a kidnapped university student. It features a few of the more infamous Night City gangs, some investigation, and some serious combat. Now, I did not run this adventure myself. One of my regular players, George, ran a group of us through it. So we picked up some copies of Tales of the Red together when we went to Gen Con last year, and I promised him that I would not open it until whatever it was that he was going to run me through was done. So it wasn't until we had finished this adventure that he gave me permission to finally open up the book and read only this scenario. So now that I have played it and I have read it, I want to offer my tips and my criticisms and a few suggestions.
And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm here to give it to you from a player's side of things, which in this case I guess is Seth's side of things since he played a PC and George played all of the NPCs for this one, and man, it gets really confusing on these ones where you were a player in the adventure.
But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So any players in the audience, please stop now. But send your game masters this way to see about running A Night at the Opera for you. But if you keep going and you spoil yourself, your only option is to run it for your game master and give them a chance to play for once. Okay, Game Masters, let's do this. The backstory is that Professor Hutt, a respected and personally wealthy psychology professor at Night City University, has been leading a double life. For the past 20 years, he's been a prominent member of the Philharmonic Vampires, a vampire gang operating in the University District area. Now, there he is known as Lord Ruthven. Now, recently, Lord Ruthven has gone cyber psycho and believes himself to be an actual vampire lord. So, using his skills at psychology, he's brainwashed and recruited members of the Bozos and the Inquisitors gangs, and he's also convinced himself that his vampire bride should be news anchor woman Barbara Dahl. But instead of kidnapping Dahl, I suspect probably because she's too high profile, he's kidnapped several students from the university and is biosculpting them into her image to serve as his bride. The adventure opens with a news report that the 7th young woman has gone missing from the university in the past 4 weeks, this one being Lucy Reinmeyer, daughter of Rockland Augmetics executive George Reinmeyer. Now, Game Masters, I suggest that you just go ahead and give this report to your players, either as a scream sheet or maybe as a news report that they overhear while they're enjoying breakfast. Now, shortly after that, they're going to get a call from a supposed representative of Mr. Reinmeyer offering them 2,000 EB each if they can recover his daughter Lucy, with 500 paid up front once they sign a contract with Rockland Augmetics.
No problem at all, boss. Consider her as good as found, because we are super experienced in investigative games.
Truth be told, we'll get further into this later on, the representative is not working for Mr. Reinmeyer at all, but he's actually the head of the Philharmonic Vampires, and he's concocted this elaborate plan to eliminate their wayward Lord Ruthven, who's become too powerful for them to handle by themselves, but also as a way of taking him out without the police or the general public learning that the kidnapper was related to the Philharmonic Vampires and therefore wasn't going to ruin their reputation. So going to the university campus, the player characters are going to notice a poster for a performance of Dracula at the Symphony Hall hosted by the vampires tomorrow night. Now, police suspect that the vampires might be involved in these kidnappings, but they simply can't just walk into their territory without causing any sort of problems. So the crew's patron has tasked the player characters with gaining access to one of the vampires' parties and investigating that gang. Now, the mention that the patron has sent them to investigate the vampires is kind of thrown in here, and it's very easy to miss. It wasn't in the blurb conversation that we were given earlier when the patron calls the player characters. So Game Masters, either add this to the initial conversation once they get the job, or at the end of the first day of the investigation, have their employer call the player characters for a status report, and if the player characters haven't figured out that there's a suspected connection between the vampires and the kidnappings, or they haven't come up with a plan to attend this event, have their boss tell them at that time to go ahead and attend tomorrow night's event.
Then if we got till tomorrow night, then we got plenty of stuff to do in the meantime. We got to get the names of those 6 other girls that are missing, and we got to do some interviews to see if there was any way that they knew each other or was somehow related to one another. Then, of course, we got to check out their class schedules and see if there was any common course or some common professor that they were taking. Then, of course, we got to get into Lucy's dorm room or apartment or wherever it was that she was living just to hunt for any clues there. That is a lot of stuff to do, and we got 2 days to do it.
Actually, the module didn't say anything about any of that stuff.
But we did all that stuff when we did the adventure. Are you saying that George made all of that stuff up for us?
He did, and I had no idea to put all that much work into it till after we were done with the adventure and I get to read it myself. Now, while the player characters are at the college campus, the module gives us several sample conversations between students that they can overhear, and some of those conversations bring up the performance of Dracula that's coming tomorrow night, and one of those conversations brings up the psychology professor isn't returning a student's email, but that's about it as far as hints go. Now, so Game Masters, here are my suggestions. First, while Lucy is the one woman that they're going to be hired to find, the 6 other women have gone missing, so go ahead and give them names because the player characters are very likely going to be asking about these other 6 victims. So give them names and a couple other details about them. Because Lord Ruthven is going to be biosculpting them, they don't need to share in much in the way as far as physical similarities, different hair color, different race. Maybe they're all slender, or they have a similar height, or maybe they have just kind of one feature in common with Barbara Dahl, but maybe they all don't have the same feature in common with her. Next, the registrar's office isn't just going to be giving out the students' class schedules to anybody that walks up and asks for one, so the player characters will have to do a suitable bribe or lie or maybe net run in order to get those schedules. Maybe they can have the clerk mention to them while they're talking to the clerk how police have already looked them over, but that none of the women have this share the same class or the same professor as one another. At least none of them do for this one semester. But if they look over the last 3 years worth of classes, they can find that all the missing women took a psychology course under Professor Huntfer, maybe even a botany teacher, somebody as well, giving the player characters 2 or 4 teachers that most, if not all of the missing girls share. And that gives the player characters an excuse to visit all their offices and maybe interview these different professors. Finally, in Lucy's dorm room or apartment or wherever it is that she's living, maybe if she has a roommate that's living there, the player characters can interview their roommate, maybe get inside her room. They might find a picture of Lucy at one of the Philharmonic Vampire events, or even they could find an invitation to this Dracula performance, or maybe her class schedule if they hadn't already gotten that through some other means. And it gives the player characters a lot of directions that they can go, a lot of different people they can talk to, a lot of different skills they can use and interact with, and kind of a lot of different paths in order to do this investigation. The next scene is the event that's set at the Opera House. Tickets are said to be on sale, but it never says in the module how much tickets are. Now, the event's dress code is listed as old world meets new, drama, sensuality, black velvet, danger. Unfortunately, the flyer image that the adventure has doesn't state that, so with a little Photoshop, I made this one. Game Masters can give this to your players to visually make the point that this is a dress code event, and this gives us a great opportunity for characters to use their wardrobe and style and personal grooming skills as they try to dress the part and try to belong with all the different themes for tonight.
Oh man, don't you even pretend this wasn't your favorite part right here.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, really? Like you didn't spend all your college years at the goth club dancing with the undead every weekend. Here you are in 2003, and this is one of your more tamer outfits from that time. You absolutely would have been a Philharmonic vampire had you been given the chance. Don't you even lie about that.
I am not ashamed of that.
Well, you should be. I mean, what the hell is on your face right there, D'Artagnan?
Anyways, my point is that this would be a good time to use all the different fashion skills that the player characters have, maybe get close to any of the people that are at this event or any of the vampires, or at the very least not stick out as total outsiders while they're here. And maybe if they roll higher than a certain DV, maybe they could learn certain information that they normally wouldn't be able to get or wouldn't be able to get that easily. Unfortunately, the module makes no mention of this, and I feel that it was a really wasted opportunity to use some of these different skills. The adventure gives us this map of the concert hall, but a much higher resolution map can be found in the Tales of the Red Plus on the Talsorian website for totally free. Now, I'd recommend placing the player characters somewhere around the 3rd or 4th row. Either their seats were assigned when they purchased the tickets, and that's where it assigned them to, or maybe because this is the type of show that slings fake blood at the audience, and most of the patrons, they don't want to have their hair and their black velvet get ruined. They all took seats at the back, leaving the only available seats in the splatter zone of the stage.
Okay, so the show's kind of like Anne Rice meets Gua. How avant-garde.
A little bit into the performance, a commotion comes from behind stage followed by gunshots. Then two figures, a bozo known as the clown and an inquisitor known as the monk, step onto stage from the back and they open fire. The crowd panics, surging towards the exit and clogging all the exits up. The clown and the monk split their attacks between the vampires and the player characters. And this is why I recommend placing the player characters up near the front. That way it would make sense that they're going to be subject to these attacks. A few of the vampires are going to fight back against these two, but after the third round, providing they're still alive, the two attackers flee, escaping once they've made it out of the back of the building. Now, once they're gone, the master, the head of the Philharmonic Vampires, who looks exactly like Bela Lugosi, comes out, and he sends everyone home, and he says that his people, they can tend to their dead, and he declares that no retribution shall be made. Now, a couple things with this scene here. First, I feel that the clown and the monk, aside from their just really generic names, should be recognizable. So maybe a streetwise plus the reputation, and the player character might be able to recognize them. That way the player characters, they can ask around and find out maybe a little bit about them from the bozos or the inquisitors, and kind of find out that they haven't seen them in the past couple months. Next, there's no real point behind this attack. No reason is ever given to the adventure. Now, we could just assume that Lord Ruthven, being a former vampire, is making an attack against his old gang, but I think we could do a little bit better than that. Now, one option could be that Lord Ruthven, who does believe himself to be a vampire lord, considers the master as his rival vampire clan leader. So these two step out to announce how there's now a greater vampire that rules Night City, and anyone that swears loyalty to Lord Ruthven will be spared, but the master and those who are still loyal to him shall die. Also, as we're going to see later on, Lord Ruthven has some low-level bozos and inquisitor mooks that are beneath him as well, so maybe the clown and the monk, they didn't come here alone. It wasn't just the two of them. Maybe we've got a few mooks from those two gangs, as well as a couple Philharmonic vampires that he's been able to kidnap and able to convert through his brainwashing, and they join in as well. So it's more like they're kind of like background characters that are going on during all this. They're not interacting with the player characters at all. They're just kind of glimpsed up in the balcony or kind of through the crowd as these the vampires are fighting other vampires or other bozos or other inquisitors, and then they either get taken out at the end of round 3 or they all kind of escape at the end of round 3. And this gives the image that it's not just these two dudes that come walking in here that show up, but a whole crew that's composed of members of 3 different gangs.
And not just that, because these dudes have been brainwashed by Lord Ruthven into believing that he is a vampire, then by default, they probably believe that the master is a vampire too. So when they come in here, they're not just going to have guns and grenades, but they're also going to have wooden stakes and crossbows and maybe holy water and other sorts of vampire hunting gear. So if the player characters, they chase the bad guys out the backstage of this building at the end of round 3, they might come across all those stagehands that those dudes killed, but now they've got wooden stakes through their hearts and their heads have been chopped off, which is a really weird thing to see in a Cyberpunk game.
Or if you don't want to go with the whole turf war idea, maybe have it where Lord Ruthven, who's about to complete his vampire bride, he needs to have something special to give her. So maybe it's a particular dress or decoration or some elaborate coffin. And that's being used in this production of Dracula. So the clown and the monk were sent to retrieve whatever this item is, making this less of an attack but more of an armed robbery for some sort of stage prop that's probably worthless if anybody was to actually look at it, but really means a lot to Lord Ruthven, because this is something he's going to give to his bride. Now, a few days after the attack, and hopefully once the player characters have had time to heal, they're going to receive word from their employer to go to a certain noodle truck in the University District and order a specific menu item while wearing a green hat. Now, once they arrive and they order this dish, the player characters are going to be approached by several vampires who present them with this fancy invitation that they're to come to the Symphony Hall at midnight that night and meet with the master. Now, Game Masters, you could turn this into a really cool handout to give to your players, maybe even put it into an envelope and hand it to them and make them open it and read it. Also, while the player characters are at the noodle truck, the player characters might overhear some different conversations. 2 of those conversations are about how no one can get a hold of Professor Hunfer in the psychology department, which isn't really related to the mission at hand, but it kind of adds to those little statement they had earlier that nobody could get a hold of the psychology professor. So if the player characters do go looking into this missing professor, they're going to find his office locked, but it's pretty easy to break in there. And inside, they're going to discover several important important things. A framed photograph of anchorwoman Barbara Dahl, a blood-splattered bozo in Inquisitor costumes,
and in a locked fridge beneath his desk, we found a jar of real pickled asparagus, a real bottle of vodka, and the real preserved head of Barbara Dahl's late husband, which you would think would cause us to hesitate enjoying that asparagus and the booze, but you would be wrong there. It didn't slow us down at all.
Now, a couple things with this optional scene here. First, outside of a couple overheard conversations about this professor who was not responding to his students, nothing sends the player characters to his office. So that's why I suggest adding some sort of relationship between the missing students and this professor, especially Lucy Reinmeyer, because she's going to be the one they're looking into the most. And it could be that she took a psychology course with him, 1 or 2 semesters ago, or maybe there's a degree of separation between her and the professor, such as Lucy has a psych major roommate, even though she's not a psych major herself. And when the player characters go and they talk to Lucy's roommate, she can talk about how Lucy helped her out with a project for one of her psych courses, and she and several other students who are recorded in this interview. And the roommate can show the player characters this recording that shows Lucy in this interview, and then kind of mention how she hasn't gotten a grade back on this thing yet because her professor seems to have gone missing, but she's pretty sure she's going to get an A for it. Then when the player characters actually do visit Professor Huntford's office, the player characters can find this video on his computer, as well as several saved screenshots of Lucy. Like, he kind of stopped paying attention to the project and just started getting all these screen grabs of Lucy, maybe kind of drawing on her, different hair, different features like that, in order to kind of show that he's got some sort of obsession with her. Now, speaking of videos that they could find while they're in his office, the bozos and the Inquisitor costumes have something to do with this brainwashing that he's doing, these kind of treatments that he's doing to recruit members from these other gangs, but nothing else is said about that or tells the player characters that that's what it's used for. We weren't able to figure that out until after the adventure was done and our game master told us. So maybe add a file in his office, something on his computer, maybe something that he doesn't want to put on his computer, something really dangerous. So it's actually an old-fashioned file folder, and it kind of shows, documents all these different sessions and these patients and how through drugs and torture he's converting members of these gangs. And maybe it's got complete with video clips of him in these costumes kind of turning these people against their own gangs. And you can have several patient files here mentioning how some of those were converted successfully while others were failures. And then in the finale of the adventure, the player characters can discover what happened to those failed experiments. When the player characters go to meet the Master at midnight, he's going to explain to them how Lord Ruthven was one of their own, but he's since gone cyber psycho, and how the public can't learn how a member of the gang has been kidnapping women because it's going to damage the entire gang's reputation. So he tells the player characters that they may kill him with no retaliation from the Philharmonic vampires, and he tells them that they've discovered where Lord Ruthven's lair is and where he's keeping these missing students, and then he gives them a wooden stake, telling the player characters to do it right. Now, I suggest that instead of the master simply handing them a wooden stake and have this be something dramatic, have this be some sort of thing that is presented before them, like it's a wooden box, and inside is this red velvet cushion, and on top of that is this fancy stake with a metal cap on one end, maybe some sort of adornments. And then as the player characters are leaving the symphony hall and all the different vampires that they pass, they give some sort of dramatic recoil, or they avert their eyes whenever they see this lacquered box, because they know that death to a vampire is inside of it. So they make this big deal about it, because as they're leaving, every vampire there knows what is in that box, and they're afraid of it. Now, Lord Ruthven's lair is an abandoned chapel, and it's guarded by some of his bozo and Inquisitor henchmen, led by the clown and monk, providing they survive the Symphony Hall attack. Now, inside, they're going to find a gruesome scene. There's a carpet made from human skin that shows different gang tattoos. There's skinned and rotting bodies that are kind of posed and sitting up at all these different tables. There's a ganger that's suspended by hooks, chanting this creepy mantra before he dies.
Holy crap! I know that Cyberpunk Red ain't got a sanity or revulsion mechanic, but I'm pretty sure that I failed mine here.
Now, a couple things here. First, this place should be rank. The smell would probably cause vomiting to anybody that walked inside, so maybe impose some sort of penalty to any player characters that aren't wearing respirator masks or have nasal filters installed. And, this place should be filled with flies and maggots boiling out of corpses' eye sockets. However, because Lord Ruthven has medical training, what if instead of it being a bunch of rotting corpses, these skinless victims have been plasticized like those Bodyworks exhibits? Maybe even that dying ganger that's suspended suspended from the ceiling. Maybe say there's tubes that are going in and out of him. So some of those tubes are leading out and they're draining all his blood in kind of these nice fancy wine bottles, as well as other tubes that are injecting him with this sort of preservation fluid, which I think gives it a good medical horror twist to an already gruesome scene, kind of adds a little bit of cyberpunk to something that's normally found in a horror scenario. In fact, game masters wanting to do this, you could have that head that they find inside Professor Huntford's office, maybe say that it's been preserved in the same way instead of how we had it, where it was a head in a jar, kind of like Silence of the Lambs. Maybe say that this thing has had some sort of medical treatment done to it to preserve it. Maybe it's even had a little bit of a kind of a reconstructive surgery to take care of any of the damage that might have been done to it as it was decaying. Now it looks perfect like it did when he was alive. Now, following the stairs downstairs from here, they're going to find them littered with spent ammo casings, which is kind of weird because Cyberpunk has had caseless ammunition since at least 2020, so I changed that to a bunch of bullet holes and other signs of fighting. The basement chapel holds 10 rows of seats. However, the map only shows 3 here. We have some more skinned bodies, including a full Borg that's been crucified to a metal cross. A pair of sentry turrets protect this room, and they're certainly a real threat, but the adventure clearly states how power cords are leading down to them and they're hanging from the ceiling, but it doesn't give a difficulty value or to hit them or the hit points if the player characters want to just simply destroy the power supply versus destroy these turrets themselves. Now, once they're through that, the characters are going to come face to face with Lord Ruthven. Now, this guy is bad news. He's got high hit points, great armor, excellent quality wolvers. Now, one thing that our game master added when we met Lord Ruthven is because he believes that he's a vampire, his opening attack against any opponent was using his vampire fangs. Now, they're scary because they have biotoxin injectors, but they're also so low damage that armor is more likely going to be able to stop this attack. And then once he sees that his fangs won't work because he can't penetrate the player character their armor, he's going to then go for his wolvers, which is almost certainly going to be able to penetrate armor. I also think that if one of the player characters pulls that wooden stake out that they got from the master, Lord Ruthven should immediately pay attention to that because he believes that that stake is the only thing that can kill him. So maybe it works a lot like a face down, except for that stake gives a pretty big plus to whoever is holding that thing, right? So now he's going to go straight for that person first, or maybe he's going to do everything he can to avoid that person because that stake is the only thing that he thinks could hurt him. Whichever way you go with it, you should have it that if that stake comes out, Lord Ruthven immediately reacts to that. Now, once Lord Ruthven is defeated, the player characters can find all of the missing girls, and they've all been biosculpted to look like Barbara Dahl, though Lucy Reinmeyer is the only survivor among them. Then once the player characters get her out of here and back to her father, the adventure is done. Overall, we had a lot of fun playing this scenario. My biggest complaint about it is just how linear it is. The player characters are essentially led by the nose, being sent to the symphony hall, and then the noodle truck, back to the symphony hall, and then on to the finale, with the only optional location being the professor's office. The characters really don't have to solve or overcome anything outside of combat in order to complete this adventure. Then there's the fact that the master has secretly been the character's patron all along, and there's no real way that's presented in here where the player characters can figure that out for themselves, which kind of makes it a meaningless plot point if the player characters can't figure it out. So maybe if at the end, once they've rescued Lucy and all the characters, they get this call later on from his father because he wants to thank them personally for bringing his daughter back to them. And through that meeting, if they mention that, they were hired by his agent, he's going to tell them that, no, his agent didn't hire them at all. And his agent, personally hired a team that had a full Borg with them. And that Borg was found inside that chapel. Or if they look over the contracts that the player characters signed, they're going to find out that no, those are not actually real Rockland Augmatic contracts, but a forgery, which leaves the characters with the knowledge that an unknown party hired them, pretending to say that they worked for the father, but they didn't actually work for the father. And even if they don't know who it is, it kind of leaves that kind of mystery that the players and the player characters know that there's something else going on and that they don't know what that is. Personally, I feel that there should be a way for the player characters to figure out where Lord Ruthven's lair is, meaning that they don't have to be handed that information by the master. So if at the Symphony Hall attack and the player characters, they fight the clown and the monk, and maybe they help with some of the injured vampires, or they in some way impress the gang, the master's going to see this and he's going to decide to trust these outsiders with the job of eliminating Lord Ruthven for them, so he's going to summon them back and tell them where they can find him. You can find A Night at the Opera and the Tales from the Red available at the Talsorian website or at RPG, links below. It's a decent adventure, but with a few changes, it can be a great adventure.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews, RPG philosophy, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, Edgerunners, you have a great day. You know, I've been drinking this 500 Eddie bottle of vodka that we found in that dude's fridge next to that severed head, and it's alright, I guess. It just doesn't seem worth that much. I think after a lifetime of drinking stuff that's been made in bathtubs, my palate could be broken.